There is a word that most serious spiritual practitioners are slightly embarrassed to use: curses. It sounds medieval, it sounds like folk superstition, it sounds like the kind of thing you would find in a horror film, rather than a serious conversation about consciousness and inner work. And yet, if you have ever felt that a specific area of your life is simply sealed off, that no matter how much you work on yourself, the same wall keeps appearing, that a particular pattern repeats with such eerie precision that it feels structural rather than just coincidental, then you already know what the language of curses is pointing at. You may not have used that word, but you have felt the thing. I want to propose a reframe today, not to make curses more mystical, but to make them more precise, to bring them out of the realm of superstition and into the territory where they can actually be worked with. Because what most people call a curse is something entirely workable. It is a pattern, a deep, structural, often inherited pattern that has been running beneath the surface of life, quietly closing doors, manufacturing familiar disappointments, recreating the same emotional weather across decades and relationships and circumstances. And patterns, once seen clearly, can be changed. My name is Jonathan. Welcome back to Alchemy of Remembrance. Let me first offer a definition of curse that I find both precise and useful. A curse is a restrictive pattern operating in a person's life, one that keeps repeating, that narrows possibilities, and that gives the impression that life is somehow sealed off in a specific domain: money, relationships, health, creative expression, belonging. The area varies from person to person, but the quality of the experience is consistent. The sense that something is blocked, that effort does not translate into results, that the same chapter keeps being written regardless of how determined the person is to write a different one. One of the most important things to understand about this pattern is that once a person fully believes they are cursed, the pattern gains strength. The belief and the pattern are in a feedback loop with each other. This is not victim blaming, it is a precise observation about how the deep mind operates. The deep mind tends to organize experience around its dominant beliefs. If the dominant belief is that I am cursed, that I am someone to whom this specific kind of misfortune always happens, the deep mind will keep selecting for confirming evidence. This means that identifying with the curse is not neutral, it is actively participatory in maintaining it. The first movement of genuine healing is therefore not ritual, not energetic clearing, not even deep psychological excavation. The first movement is the refusal to accept the identity of the cursed person as your permanent and defining truth. This is subtle but extremely critical. You can acknowledge the pattern fully, see it clearly, take it seriously, feel the weight of how long it has been running, without building your entire identity around it. The pattern is something you are working with. It is not what you are. Curses are often linked to chaos, and there is a reason for this. The pattern that operates as a curse in someone's life frequently arrives wearing the mask of disruption. Things fall apart, plans collapse, the familiar order breaks down, and the instinct, deeply human, deeply understandable, is to resist the chaos, to label it as hostile, to try to restore the previous stability as quickly as possible. But here is what the tantric tradition observed and what my own experience confirms. The more chaos is avoided, the more it tends to return, often in new and more intense forms, as if it is insisting on something, as if it will not be quieted by suppression. The deities associated with this territory in the Indian tradition, Kali, Bhairava, Chinnamasta, are not comfortable figures. They are not the gentle guardians of popular spirituality. They are forces of acceleration. Their function is not to soothe. Their function is to force what is hidden to the surface, to make visible what has been operating in the dark for too long, and the ego tried to deny. When chaos enters your life, the question that I urge you to ask is not, how do I restore order? The question is, what is this disruption trying to surface? What has been running beneath the apparent stability that this chaos is now making impossible to ignore? This is the reframe that transforms the experience of a curse from something that is happening to you into something that is happening through you for a purpose that your conscious mind may not yet understand, but your deeper intelligence has been pressing toward. Chaos can initiate immense transformation, but only if it is met with presence rather than resistance. Only if there is enough willingness to stay in the difficulty rather than fleeing immediately back to the familiar. Now, I would like to introduce here a principle that will be uncomfortable for some people, but that I believe is one of the most practically empowering ideas in this territory. And I want to be very precise about it because it is easy to distort in a direction that produces shame rather than agency. For an external pattern, whether you call it a curse, a parasitic attachment, or simply a recurring misfortune, to take hold in someone's life, there needs to be a point of resonance inside. Something in the inner field that is vibrating at a compatible frequency. Without that resonance point, entry is genuinely difficult. This does not mean that every difficulty is self-created. It does not mean that people deserve the harm that comes to them. Those interpretations are distortions that collapse a precise principle into blame. What it means is something far more useful. If something keeps attaching, if a particular quality of experience keeps recurring regardless of the external circumstances, then there is almost certainly something in the inner field that is keeping that connection open. Almost always something unconscious. Usually something that was installed long before the person had the awareness to question it. For example, the fear of scarcity that became normal because it was normal in childhood. The belief that love requires suffering because suffering was the context in which love first arrived. The conviction that visibility is dangerous because visibility was dangerous once in a specific environment at a specific age. These inner resonance points are not moral failings, they are survival adaptations, but they have become hooks, and hooks attract what they are shaped to hold. Once ownership of the resonance point begins, once the person stops locating the entire problem outside themselves and starts asking what inside me is keeping this connection active, sovereignty becomes available in a way that it was not there before. Not because the outer pattern was invented by the person, but because the inner point of attachment is now within their reach. Now let's talk about generational curses and the inherited scripts. In my experience, some of the most stubborn patterns are not personal in their origin at all. They are inherited. They arrive through the family system before the person was old enough to even choose them. A child learns to shut down emotionally because that was how survival worked in their household. That response becomes normal. If no one examines it, it passes to the next generation. The grandchild of someone who was persecuted carries a vigilance in their nervous system that feels like their own anxiety but has roots in events that occurred decades before their birth. The epigenetic research I discuss in the context of the ancestral healing video confirms that this transmission is biological as well as psychological. Generational curses in this framework are not supernatural impositions. They are inherited scripts that have been running long enough to look like fate, long enough that the people inside them have stopped questioning whether they could be different, long enough that the script has been mistaken for the nature of things. The crucial insight here is this: it only looks like fate until consciousness enters it. The moment someone in the lineage becomes genuinely aware of the pattern, not just intellectually aware, but somatically, emotionally, honestly aware of it, The automatic transmission is interrupted. The script can no longer run entirely on its own authority. This is one of the reasons ancestral healing matters so deeply. The person doing this work is not only healing themselves, they are changing what gets transmitted forward. They are becoming the node in the lineage where a pattern that had been running for generations finally becomes visible and therefore finally becomes workable. And then there is something that needs to be said about external clearing. Rituals, energetic removals, shamanic work, and various forms of curse breaking ceremony that exist across traditions. These can be genuinely useful. In my personal experience, they can definitely shift something in the field. They can provide a felt sense of release that allows the inner work to begin moving, but they are almost always only the first layer. If the inner imprint remains untouched, the same pattern returns. In a different form, wearing different clothes, but recognizably the same script, because the surface has been cleared without touching the root. The ritual addressed the symptom, but the seed belief was never reached. There is a phrase from the alchemical and Gnostic traditions that I return to often when working in this territory. Love the beast in the abyss. The beast sounds threatening. It sounds like something that should be fought or banished or overcome. But in almost every case I have encountered, in my own experience and in watching others navigate this territory, the beast is not what it appears to be. The beast is the abandoned part of the self. It is almost always the exiled inner child, the part that was too much or too little for the environment it was born into, the part that still longs for the safety, the love, the recognition, the consistency it needed and did not reliably receive. And because it was exiled rather than integrated, it did not disappear. It went underground into the deep mind and has been influencing events from there ever since. Remember, a hungry part attracts hungry situations, hungry people, hungry energies. Not because the universe is cruel, but because the field mirrors what is held within it. The unmet longing keeps generating situations that offer and then fail to deliver what the longing is reaching for. The loop runs until someone turns toward the beast rather than away from it. Turning toward it does not mean indulging it or becoming consumed by it. It means bringing genuine attention to it. It means asking, what does this part of me actually need? Not what it is afraid of, not what it has been trying to get through the pattern. What does it actually need directly now from me? Safety, honesty, patience, presence, the qualities that the inner parent was not able to provide. When those qualities begin to be offered, not as performance, not as a technique, but as genuine care for the most vulnerable part of the self, the deep mind starts to reorganize. The hungry part is no longer hungry in the same way. The hook loses its charge. The pattern begins to lose the inner adhesion that was keeping it in place. Let me close with the practical stuff, because everything in this video has been pointing toward one question. What does the actual work of healing a curse look like? The deep mind carries a story. That story is not neutral, it is active. And it shapes perception, generates expectation, selects for confirming evidence, and writes the same chapter again and again until something changes at the level of the story itself. Healing requires creating a new story, not denial, not the pretense that the past did not happen, but a genuine change in the authority the past holds over the present. The process moves through several movements. First, stepping back from the environments and relationships that keep reopening the same wound, or at minimum, establishing clearer boundaries around them. You cannot rewrite the script while still in the conditions that keep confirming the old one. Second, going to the origin, not just describing the pattern from the outside, but actually going to where it was first installed. The specific memory, the specific moment, the specific age, meeting it not with analysis but with honest, compassionate presence, seeing it clearly for what it was, a wound, an adaptation, a moment of genuine difficulty that produced a belief that then kept running. Third, identifying the seed belief explicitly. What did this experience teach you about how the world works, about what you deserve, about what is safe or dangerous? These beliefs are rarely consciously held. They operate as assumptions. The work here is to surface the assumption and write it down, make it visible and concrete, because an unconscious shadow controls behavior from the background. A conscious one can be related to, questioned, and ultimately replaced. Fourth, and this is where most approaches stop too soon, embodying the new story through action, not just through thought. The deep mind does not update on the basis of intellectual understanding, it updates on the basis of repeated experience, which means the new belief has to be lived and enacted, chosen again and again in the small daily moments where the old pattern would previously have run automatically. One C action today, as I always suggest, one choice made from the new story rather than the old one, and then over time, what was artificial becomes natural. The new frequency becomes the default, and what many people have experienced as a curse, fixed, immovable, seemingly fated, reveals itself as what it always was, a pattern, asking finally to be made conscious. Curses are real, but not in the way superstition describes them, in the way that any deep, structural, inherited pattern is real, because it operates with genuine force in a person's life, shaping what is possible and what keeps being closed off. But patterns, once seen clearly, lose the authority they held in the dark. The beast, once loved rather than fled from, loses its hunger. The script, once rewritten at the level of the deep mind, produces a different story, not immediately, not without genuine work, but with the consistency that comes from understanding what you are actually working with. Next week, we go into the territory of karma and ancestral healing, the longer lineage dimension of what we have been discussing today, the patterns that did not begin with you, and what it means to be the one who finally makes them conscious. I am your friend Jonathan. This is Alchemy of Remembrance. Thanks for staying with me. Hope these insights I shared today, based on my life experiences, help you in your journey to some way. I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care and be blessed.